Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Sweeney Gray and this is From the South, the daily news brief from Tell Us Your English. And we start this new edition right now. We start in Venezuela, where an armed group responsible for numerous attacks against the government has been neutralized after a dramatic standoff with security forces on Monday. The group and its leader, Oscar Perez, were finally defeated. Our correspondent in Caracas, Freddie Gillingham, has this report.
Dramatic scenes unfolded on Monday as Venezuelan security forces laid siege to an armed cell. The El Junquito area in the hills just outside Caracas suddenly echoed to gunfire as a building believed to be harbouring a group who have been on the country's most wanted list for months were finally tracked down. The group, apparently led by the former Venezuelan police pilot Oscar Perez, came to prominence for attacking government buildings in a stolen helicopter last summer. Other incidents followed, including stealing weapons from a military outpost. Videos of the group's threats and activities were given high priority by the international media, often portraying Perez as a kind of Rambo freedom fighter. But there was nothing heroic about this last encounter.
Unfortunately, we had 2 young policemen killed while they were resting and waiting for these terrorists to give themselves up. They were shot in the head, both of them. And they also left 6 Bolivarian policemen seriously wounded who are fighting for their lives. So the commando groups had to take action, and they defeated one part of the terrorist group and arrested more than 5 who have given their testimony and told everything.
The Ministry of Defense later confirmed the fate of the group.
In the face of an aggression that put the life and integrity of our officers at risk, we followed the agreed protocols to neutralize the aggressors, with the unfortunate result of 7 terrorists dead. We have to emphasize that the security forces follow the international and universal criteria for such situations that threaten the peace and public security.
News of the siege and the group's eventual defeat came just in time for President Maduro's annual balance sheet of the past year. 2017 was a year which saw new levels of political violence from some sectors of the opposition. 2018 will most certainly bring new challenges here in Venezuela, but terrorism has been taken off the list for now. Freddie Gillingham, Telesur, Caracas.
We now move over to Chile, where protests against the Catholic Church are escalating across the country while Pope Francis is visiting. As soon as the Pope arrived in Chile on Monday evening, protesters dressed as nuns denounced the high cost of the visit and the Chilean Church's involvement in sexual abuse scandals. The Catholic Church's popularity in Chile is the lowest in Latin America, and many see it as a pillar of the conservative establishment.
Pope Francis, who said there will be zero tolerance in sex abuse case in the church, named Bishop Juan Barros, who had been accused of covering up the biggest pedophile of the Chilean church history, and following the reaction of rejection from the community and from the clergy, he called us idiots.
We are here because we are interested in the Pope's visit. We firmly believe that he is an historical character in the history of our Catholic popes. We are very happy for him to be among us. We also believe that this is a huge opportunity to tell him what's happening in our church with our hierarchy, which each day identifies itself more with power and less with the poor.
And during his meeting with Chile's President Michelle Bachelet, the pontiff apologized for the sexual abuse of minors by Catholic priests.
I want to express the pain and shame that I feel for the irreparable damage done to young children by ministers of the Church.
A Chilean court put Mapuche leader Francisco Lincoln under house arrest just days ahead of Pope Francis's visit. The Mapuche leader had voiced hopes of meeting with Pope Pope Francis during his visit to the Araucania region, saying she wanted to let him know about the plight of the indigenous people. Lincoln Now, one of 11 Mapuche community members acquitted for a 2013 double homicide, fled to Bolivia in search of asylum. Chile's Court of Appeal has now ordered a retrial of the case.
What
they are saying is a lie. The police planted a weapon in my house. I tell you this with all sincerity. I don't like to lie. There wasn't any meeting in my house.
Meanwhile, preparations for Pope Francis's arrival in Peru are underway. Security officials conducted simulated emergency exercises at the site where the Pope will host Mass outdoors. They have also organized motorcades that will escort the Pope mobile as it drives through the streets of Lima. Pope Francis will arrive in the capital city on January 18th. He will also visit Puerto Maldonado and Trujillo. And at least 6 people were injured in the Peruvian city of Chiclayo after a police car crashed into a crowd of pilgrims en route to see Pope Francis. The police car lost control and ran over a crowd of pilgrims who had gathered in the city's main park. The car then swerved and smashed into a nearby truck. Among the injured, 2 women who were taken to hospitals in serious condition. The details of the driver's condition are unknown. And we'll be back very soon, so stay with us. This Tuesday marks 2 years of the detention of Argentina's social leader, Milagros Salga. She was arrested on charges of fraud and criminal conspiracy, but human rights groups disagree with the arrest. They say her detention was arbitrary.
In the framework of the fierce persecution that was driven by Governor Gerardo Morales against Milagros Salga, different judicial charges were made against her. The deputy, Juan Manuel Esquivel, explained to us one of the reasons behind the harassment against the leader.
With Milagro as a deputy of the province, the classical two-party system breaks. The political tension increased a lot. Agreements of the Peronistic radical group are broken, and she begins to be an unbalancing factor within the political life of this province. We remember, for example, the time when legislators intended to increase their salary, and she constantly denounced this.
The relationship between Morales and President Mauricio Macri with construction businessmen also helps us to understand her arrest, qualified as arbitrary by different international human rights organizations.
In the last decade, thousands of cooperative members who were in the 1990s unemployed built 100,000 social houses in Argentina. It's not a coincidence that one of the first measures that Macri took was to shut down the cooperative's housing plans, and that was also one of the reasons for which Sala was imprisoned. Today's social housing is not being built, and the few houses that are being built are by Macri's friends and the old contractors of the country.
The sugar businessman Carlos Pedro Blaquier was accused of being one of the civil accomplices of the military dictatorship. The role of social organizations for the judiciary to investigate him was key in the history of the province.
He's the main character of this history, because Blaquier is the one who has pressed to put limits to Tupac Amaru, to arrest Milagro as soon as the government changed, because Milagro clearly stated their responsibility in the dictatorship crimes and the current workers' exploitation.
These are the keys to understanding why Milagros Sala is considered a political prisoner and why on the 2nd anniversary of her detention there will be more demands of her immediate freedom.
Ecuador's electoral court has ruled that Lenin Moreno remains the president of the ruling party Alianza País. Several members of the directorate asked to have him removed because of political differences with the leader of the Citizens' Revolution, former President Rafael Correa. After the ruling, Correa's supporters announced they will form a new party called Citizen Revolution. And former President Correa responded on social media to this division in the Alianza País party. On Twitter, Correa wrote, "Today, on the 11th anniversary of the Citizens' Revolution, the gift of the terrorists is to steal Alianza País with an unprecedented and divided ruling by the TCE. They can take away Alianza País. They can never take away our will and our convictions. Despite the pain, this only makes us stronger. Hasta la victoria siempre." Guatemalan President Jimmy Morales has completed his second year amid complaints that he hasn't fulfilled his campaign promises. On Sunday, he delivered his annual report while facing protests and questions.
Police and military surrounded Congress as President Jimmy Morales delivered the second government report of his presidency. Security forces did not allow protesters inside the building to express their dissatisfaction with this government. The demonstrators blamed the government for political crisis and tragedies like the fire at a state-run orphanage.
We can't feed our children. Salaries are too low. We face violence and instability. The girls from the safe home were burned alive, 51 of them. And he's spending millions on marketing. It's just not fair.
The scene inside Congress was the complete opposite. President Morales presented his report without facing any opposition. He claimed Guatemala has thrived thanks to the order he established.
I want to remind all of you that the country we received was in disastrous conditions. We needed to clean house in financial, administrative, and political matters. We achieved this thanks to the order established in 2016, and we saw the results over the past year.
President Morales' claims stand in contrast to reality. In the last year, 111 children died from chronic malnutrition. The country's human rights attorney say there has been no major victory facing this pandemic.
Chronic malnutrition is a crucial issue. It's disheartening that children continue to die in Guatemala because there is no food available. Another issue is healthcare, which must be developed so it's available for all citizens.
President Morales kicks off his third year in office facing social pressure and legal battles. His son and brother are facing corruption charges. The president is also awaiting a decision from the Constitutional Court surrounding charges he received bribes from the army.
More details are emerging about the murder of independent journalist Carlos Domínguez in Mexico on Saturday. The political columnist was at a stoplight with his family when armed men flung open his car door and attacked him. He was stabbed 21 times. An investigation is underway to determine whether the murder is connected to his work. Mexico is considered one of the most dangerous places in the world for journalists. More than 130 journalists have been killed there since 2000. And at least 10 workers died in Colombia when a bridge collapsed on a road that connects Bogota with the city of Villavicencio. Another 8 workers suffered injuries from the incident. According to the coordinator of the National Unit for Disaster Risk Management, the bridge collapsed suddenly when there were about 20 workers at the site. The victims were welders who were in the lower part of the viaduct, located 65 kilometers from the capital. 31 of the 38 judges who will make up the special peace course in Colombia have been sworn in by President Juan Manuel Santos. The remaining 7 will start their tenure in March.
The Colombian president specified the judges have a vital mission: bring clarity to crimes committed during the armed conflict and those responsible so that they can be judged in a court of law.
You will judge and punish criminal acts committed during or in relation to the armed conflict, not just by guerrillas or state agents, but by civilians who took part in the conflict and may have been active participants in some of the most serious crimes.
The Special Peace Court will start working with a model for transitional justice that looks to find balance between the right for peace and enforcing the law. It's in this balance where a victim's truth usually exists.
A model of justice based on truth, on placing all your cards on the table in order to obtain legal benefits, but even more so, to obtain cultural and symbolic benefits for a society that has yet to turn the page, for a society that is in denial, that resists honoring life by moving forward with the truth.
The judge's first order of business is to establish internal regulations and a bill of criminal procedure under which they will operate. But even if the judges will start work on Monday, they are still waiting for the Constitutional Court to review the regulatory law approved by Congress, since this law imposed obstacles for human rights defenders.
It makes absolutely no sense that human rights defenders would not be allowed to be judges. There aren't more transparent and suitable people for the job, with a higher moral authority to take part in this process to uncover the truth and provide justice than human rights defenders. We know by heart everything the country has undergone.
The start of the court's work is significant for victims since it marks the beginning of an integral system of truth, justice and reparations. Regardless, victims hope that the Constitutional Court will nullify some in-depth changes made to this project, like excluding third parties who had a hand in the armed conflict and all the obstacles put in place for human rights defenders.
Brazilian legislators have blocked the president's attempt to privatize the country's state-owned electric company, Eletrobras. De facto President Michel Temer issued a decree to make the company private last year, but the federal judge who ruled against it said it bypassed Brazil's Congress and represented a direct attack on Brazilian public assets. Eletrobras is the largest electricity company in Latin America. If privatized, electricity costs could be subjected to an increase. Working together with its suppliers, Petrobras developed allows the use of... Veteran Jamaican journalist and communicator Ian Bourne was laid to rest on Sunday. Mr. Bourne died last month after suffering several heart attacks. The funeral was almost a day-long event, worthy of a man who, as Deputy CEO of the Jamaica Information Service, served 3 prime ministers, all of whom were present at his funeral to pay their respects. He was lauded as a true patriot who, through his work, inspired many Jamaicans to excel.
I speak on behalf of the Union of Prime Ministers that have benefited from his service. And right about this time, I would be in close contact with Ian because I would have had to lean on him for the preparation of my budget presentation. And so too would have Prime Minister Golding and Prime Minister Simpson-Miller. So when you hear talk of a void left, it is a real void.
The Cuban capital is hosting a traveling exhibition on one of the world's most important writers, Miguel de Cervantes. Our correspondent, Fabiola Lopez, gives us a closer look into the life of the author of Don Quixote.
People say that in a city so close to Cervantes as Havana, it couldn't miss out on holding an exhibit dedicated to the most important writer in the Spanish-speaking world. And in a unique theater like this, to showcase through his characters the work of Miguel de Cervantes, in the lobby before entering the ballet performance of Don Quixote.
It's a way to synthesize all these expressions in one palace. It's a way of making it a cultural center, to change the perspective of this grand theater and make it a temple of the arts, like it used to be long ago.
Through images and words in 9 giant books, there are small scenes that show the sense of the characters in Cervantes' books. People are invited to read shepherds, pilgrims, gentlemen and squires, farmers and puppeteers, smart and humble philosophers. It was planned with kids and family on our mind, so they can have interactive activities, not only through technology, but manual. We have a section in which people can dress up, and another where there are 3D glasses for them to see the drawings.
I think we can enjoy these characters very much, because few times we can play with literature. We see it as something serious.
Mirror games, card labyrinths, moons, sheep and fish, coins falling down like rain and masks. It's a wonderful world of fantasy to spread the richness of the creation of a man who walks through comedy, tragedy, laughter, and entertainment with the same genius mind. In this exhibit, a special invitation is made to the spectators. You are invited to, at least for a moment, be like Don Quixote, clever, crazy, and free, or like Sancho, reasonable, faithful, and practical.
We remain in Cuba, where experts are predicting an increase in forest fires in 2018 because of the damage caused by Hurricane Irma, which hit last year. The risk increased after Irma brought down trees, resulting in an accumulation of foliage on the ground. 2017 saw at least 350 fires, which damaged more than 6,000 hectares of land and caused huge economic losses for the nation. The United Nations puts Cuba ahead of reforestation efforts in the region. And we'll be back very soon, so stay with us. France expelled more than 14,000 migrants in 2017, according to the Ministry of the Interior. The announcement comes right as the French government is boosting a new asylum law to toughen immigration policy. According to official data, the number of undocumented people trying to enter the country reached more than 85,000 last year. Meantime, French President Emmanuel Macron visited Calais, a city that has become a focal point for migrants hoping to reach Britain.
Calais is not the back door to England. And I want to be very clear to you, that will continue to be the case. Under no circumstances we will allow illegal networks to emerge or develop here. Under no circumstances we will let another jungle camp appear here, or any other illegal occupation of land.
Hundreds of people marched in front of U.S. President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach on Monday. They were protesting his offensive definition of Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries on Monday. Several demonstrators were Haitians living in the United States. Trump was spending the day at his West Palm Beach golf course. Across the street from the demonstrators was a group of Trump supporters who convened to see the president's passing motorcade. Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy announced on Monday that Madrid will continue to run Catalonia's government even if the former leader, Carles Puigdemont, is voted regional president by the Catalan parliament. Carles Puigdemont's pro-independent party won the most votes in the December 21st regional elections. Together with other separatist parties, they have a slim majority over pro-unity parties. Puigdemont supporters argue that the voters have elected him and he should be the rightful ruler. Ahead of the Catalan parliament swearing-in ceremony, independent supporters are calling for mass protests to demand the freedom of its political leaders. Our correspondent, Joan Ortiz, has more.
We are reporting from Barcelona at a time when we still don't know who will preside over the Catalan parliament. It is the second most important position in Catalonia, and it will be especially controversial in the next legislative term. This after there's less than 24 hours to form the new parliament that was elected on December 21st. This position is controversial since the swearing-in of Carles Puigdemont is still on hold, and if it does happen, it will be done without his presence. The rules of the parliament will need to be revised to see if such a swearing-in could be possible. The government has already said this could not be possible and has even made two threats. Firstly, if the swearing goes ahead, then Article 155 would continue to exist. And secondly, there would be consequences to those who support and allow this swearing-in. Meanwhile, citizens haven't forgotten that this Tuesday makes it 3 months since Jordi Sanchez and Jordi Cuixart were arrested. This is the reason why there are protesters across Catalonia and here in Barcelona. They will gather from 5 different communities and will march to demand their release and reject the actions of the Spanish government. They also called for a march outside the parliament when the swearing-in is scheduled to take place to support the pro-independence parties.
We thank Joan Ortiz for that report. Since 2015, more than 5,000 children have died in Yemen as a result of the civil war. The international coalition, led by Saudi Arabia, has insisted that it is not blocking the arrival of humanitarian aid to Yemen. However, According to UNICEF official figures, about 11 million children in Yemen need humanitarian aid to survive, 2 million are malnourished, and some 400,000 suffer from food shortages and cholera outbreaks, forcing them to live in deplorable conditions. Clashes have erupted between Palestinians and Israeli forces in the West Bank village of Joyous following the funeral of a man killed by Israeli gunfire. 24-year-old Ahmed Salem was shot and killed while demonstrating on Monday. Israeli authorities say they opened fire because protesters were throwing rocks at them. Tension in the region has risen since U.S. President Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital in December, reversing decades of U.S. policy. 18 Palestinians and 1 Israeli have been killed since. The United Nations Human Rights Office has voiced deep concern over the detention of Ahed Tamimi, the Palestinian girl arrested for hitting an Israeli soldier. In a statement, it says Tamimi should be granted special protection as a child in line with international law. Tamimi has been detained for almost a month now. She was due to be released on Monday, but authorities extended her detention. We go to our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza for more.
16-year-old Ahed Tamimi, who is currently imprisoned in the Israeli jails, was expected to be released today. However, an Israeli court decided to extend her detention up to 2 more days. Israeli courts brought 21 charges against Ahed. This means that she could face up to 14 years in Israeli jails. To many Palestinians and also many people around the world, Ahed Tamimi is now a hero, a Palestinian hero, after a video was released showing this child, this 16-year-old girl, pushing and defending herself against Israeli soldiers in December. Many Palestinian peoples have headed to the streets yesterday, today, and are organizing more protests and rallies to be held tomorrow and in the upcoming days to support Ahed Tamimi and also her family.
We thank Noor for that report, and we've come to the end of this daily news brief. For these and many other stories, you can go to our website, telesutv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Sweeney Gray. Thank you so much for watching.